Hello and welcome to the presentation of how to design the perfect prompt by myself, Anna-Maria Meck, and Dr. Lisa Precht. In this presentation, I will give you an introduction into the topic, an overview over our methods, and I will introduce you to our results as well as the limitations of our exploratory studies. So here's where we stand in terms of automotive prompt design right now. We know voice is the perfect modality for in-car interactions as it leads to fewer driving errors, less distraction, and reduction of cognitive load. Voice and the car definitely are a dream team. But voice can also adversely affect traffic safety when applied for improper use cases and when designed too complexly. And for that not to happen, that's where the perfect prompt comes into play. But to design the perfect prompt is more difficult than it may look, because while we know exactly how to design a conversation in terms of dialogue guidance and dialogue management, we do not know exactly how to do so on a linguistic level. And that is the gap we want to close with our paper. And to do so, we will be answering our 4 research questions. Number 1, what is the entirety of linguistic parameters with a potential impact on prompt design? So, which means do we even have to formulate prompts differently? 2, which manifestation of linguistic parameters is preferred by participants for which prompt type? We suspect that users' prompt preferences are use case specific. So in our studies, we looked at functional prompts, which ask for user input or confirm function execution. Chit-chat prompts where users call for a more diverting and socially driven conversation, and informational prompts which address the user's need for information around car functionalities. Research question 3, which design guidelines and best practices can be distilled on a linguistic level? And research question 4, do these results allow for identification of overall design patterns? Now, to obtain linguistic parameters for our studies and answer research question 1, we used the following 2-step recipe. Step 1, work through a complete German contemporary grammar. Nothing to worry, a complete German contemporary grammar consists of only 300 pages and 94 chapters. And second, extract syntactical, grammatical, and lexical parameters which can express at least 2 comparable manifestations. Manifestation thereby meaning a formulation option. And this extraction goes along with applying a thorough filter onto the parameters for our study purposes. For each potential parameter, we asked ourselves, does a parameter have at least 2 comparable manifestations? Does varying a parameter lead to an alternation in meaning? Because if so, we need to reject such a parameter, as we cannot rule out participants will judge the change in meaning rather than the change in formulation. The same goes if varying a parameter impacts other linguistic parameters. And finally, we asked ourselves if a parameter can be expressed across prompt types, because if not, we rejected it again, as we want to find out if prompt preferences change across prompt types. To find out which formulations are preferred by study participants, again with a 2-step recipe, to answer research question 2. First step, design prompts which differ only in one formulation. For example, here we have 2 prompts, one in active and one in passive voice. They only differ in the formulation should I select the recommended route or should the recommended route be selected. Second, present these prompts to study participants in an A-B study in a direct comparison. So study participants' decision for one manifestation shows us their preference for a certain formulation. If they choose option 1, they prefer active formulations for this prompt. If they choose option 2, they prefer passive formulations for this prompt. We conducted the study with a total of 1,206 study participants aged between 18 and 66 years and a quite balanced gender ratio. The majority of our participants indicate to drive 5,000 to 10,000 kilometers a year and use their in-car voice assistant on a weekly basis. Moving on to results and research question 1. So what is the entirety of linguistic parameters with a potential impact on prompt design? After extracting linguistic parameters and carefully filtering them, we retrieved a total of 4 syntactical, 13 grammatical, and 11 lexical parameters with a potential impact on prompt design, which makes 28 parameters in total. And those are our magical parameters which will make it possible to design the perfect prompt. These 28 parameters were subsequently fed into exploratory studies, which allows to answer research question 2. So, which manifestation of linguistic parameters is preferred by participants for which prompt type? And we found that study participants do indeed have preferences for certain formulations, which means that the perfect prompt exists. And we found those preferences across different prompt types. So to give you a concrete example, for the parameter voice, with its manifestations active voice versus passive voice, 90% of study participants preferred the actively formulated prompt. I will have to maintain the suspense for the remaining best practices for now, though, and jump to research questions 3 and 4, because when evaluating the study outcomes as a whole, we did not only find concrete preferences, which can be poured into best practices, but we also found patterns in the results. So for the questions 3, which design guidelines and best practices can be distilled on a linguistic level, and 4, do results allow for identification of overall design patterns, aka how to design the perfect prompt, the patterns we found allowed for distilling 3 main design guidelines for linguistic-centered prompt design. First, prompts should be written in plain and simple language to avoid complexity. Second, prompts should be written in natural and rather informal language without being too colloquial. And third, prompts should be written results and information oriented and leave out unnecessary elements. So, guidelines like these are great, and you may already know similar ones as they are pretty intuitive. But the question with all these kinds of guidelines is, what do they mean exactly? What do they entail? So, what does plain and simple exactly mean? What is natural? And what constitutes a results-oriented prompt? Well, because we answered research questions 1 and 2 and know the concrete best practices for prompt design, we can now cluster these best practices onto the design guidelines, which means we can now operationalize our best practices to fill the guidelines with life. And here comes the life. So, what constitutes plain and simple language exactly? On a continuum of very simple to very complex, prompts should tend towards the simple side of the continuum. We, of course, choose the piece of cake. So using plain and simple language means using hypotactical sentences, so a sentence structure with main and subordinate clauses. Using medium-length prompts, which in our study consisted of up to 15 words for functional prompts and chit-chat prompts, but using long prompts with more than 15 words for informational prompts. If you have a main and a subordinate clause, put the subordinate clause behind the main clause, so make it a positive subordinate clause. And as for word order, it goes subject, predicate, object. I will fade in concrete examples to all of these parameters at the end of the presentation, so you can pause the video and read up on them later. 4. Using natural and informal language without being too colloquial. Yes, be informal, but not too informal, and do not overstretch informality. To write natural and informal prompts, do use indicative rather than subjunctive, verbal style rather than nominal style, and active rather than passive voice. Do not use interjections and only a low degree of politeness, and refrain from using participles, except for informational prompts where participles can be a means to condense sentences, which was appreciated in our studies. As for guideline 3, use results in information-oriented language. Always be direct and immediate in your formulations, as study participants did not enjoy linguistic bells and whistles at all. So to be specific, use main verbs and no auxiliary verbs. Write your prompts in the present tense. Reference things from the user's point of view by using the third person plural. Leave out unnecessary adjectives and adverbs, and do not use filler words. Users only showed a preference for prompts with filler words for chit-chat prompts, where a low amount of filler words was well received. Now for necessary information, that's a different pair of shoes, because users want important prompt parts to be repeated. So do feel free to repeat already used nouns in prompts with more than 2 sentences, except for informational prompts where, probably because of the wordiness of nouns, deletion of already mentioned nouns was preferred. Finally, some limitations of our studies need mentioning. So for one, the study was conducted in German, so while results may be applicable to other languages, we have not tested that and up until now have to assume that results are most likely language dependent. There was no qualitative data collection and evaluation at this point, so while we now know user preferences regarding prompt design, we do not know the decisions behind them. The study was conducted on paper, not auditorily, to remove possible interaction effects with text-to-speech outputs. Lastly, the study was not conducted under real driving conditions, so prompt preferences need to be validated in an actual in-car context, which is exactly what we'll be concerned with in our upcoming studies. So as you can see, there's still quite the exciting road ahead of us. And with this, I'm coming to the end of the presentation, and the things I invite you to take home with you if you like. So when writing prompts, take the prompt type into account. Be plain and simple, be natural and informal, and be result and information oriented. Now here's the promised examples to the parameters. and a quick glimpse of the references I used in the presentation. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention and look forward to your questions now.